This video I call the good, the sneaky, and the really ugly, or not all microbes are bad all of the time. In this video, I'm going to cover the following topics. What do I mean by good, sneaky, and really ugly microbes? Then we're going to cover the characteristics of mutualistic symbionts, the characteristics of human opportunistic pathogens, the characteristics of true pathogens, and a summary of all of that fun stuff. Before we go into those topics, let's talk about what I want you to learn from this. So this will begin your journey in learning how to learn, make connections with other topics that we've covered so far, solve problems. I will provide you information to be able to solve problems through this topic, and you will develop an awareness of how one's cultural origins, practices, and habits impact their own microbiome, specifically our attitude toward microbes. Explain the interrelatedness of microbes that are adapted to living on humans or in humans, and we won't cover nutritional practices quite yet, and analyze how one's cultural background and experiences affect perception of personal and environmental cleanliness and resulting susceptibility to various diseases. So let's go over what I mean by good, sneaky, and really ugly microbes. First off, let me give you a little bit of history. Traditionally, in microbiology, we studied pathogens, so organisms that cause disease. And this has affected our perception of microbes. Basically, we thought all microbes were bad, and that's probably how you feel about microbes. But as we've learned more through time, we've learned that not all microbes are bad. There are good microbes, there are sneaky microbes, and then there are really ugly microbes. So, let me tell you what I mean by that. So, what do I mean by good? These are microbes that never do any harm to the host. Now, realize that when I say never, I'm generalizing. In biology, there are always exceptions. But, so far as we know, these microbes never harm you. And in fact, they do good for you. And we call these mutualistic symbionts. So, sneaky, what do I mean by sneaky? These microbes may do some good, they may do some harm, it all depends upon the situation. And we call these microbes opportunistic pathogens. What is a pathogen? A pathogen is an organism that causes disease. So, notice if you give it the opportunity, it will cause disease. And then, really ugly, they always do harm if they can. And we call these either true pathogens or just pathogens. So let's talk about characteristics of mutualistic symbionts, or how can we tell if something is a mutualistic symbiont? They do good all of the time, so far as we know. Like I said, in biology, we always have to say that because there's always an exception. And both the microbe and the host benefit. And the host suffers or develops disease if the symbiont is gone. So let's take a look at some of the microbes from our list that we're going to be studying this semester that are considered mutualistic symbionts. So we have things like Bifidobacterium. Now this organism, this bacterium, is found in the human intestines, and we find that when it's there in proper numbers, you're less likely to develop autoimmune disease. Things like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So you want to have a good number of Bifidobacterium. Also, we're finding that Bifidobacterium digests complex carbohydrates that you can't, and we're able to metabolize the byproducts. So they help you digest your food. Isn't that wonderful? In return for helping us digest our food and keep our immune system in balance, we provide Bifidobacterium with a nice warm environment, body temperature to be exact. It's moist, it's controlled pH and salt, and we feed them. Every time you eat something, you send food down to your Bifidobacterium. It is a mutualistic relationship where both the microbe and the host benefit. So let's talk about our opportunistic pathogens. This is what I call situational ethics for microbes. In other words, they will behave themselves if the situation is right, and if the situation is not right for us, but right for the microbe, they will cause disease. Here's an example. If you have them in the right numbers, so in other words, with most opportunistic pathogens, we need them in low numbers, or if they're in the right place, for example, if they stay in your gut instead of expanding into your bloodstream, they behave themselves, and they may actually provide a benefit to the host. But if they get too high of numbers, or if they get into the wrong place, they run riot and cause disease. From our list of microbes that we're studying this semester, which ones are considered opportunistic pathogens? Now, some of these, you may be thinking, what do you mean opportunistic pathogens? They always cause disease. So Clostridium difficile, or also known as C. diff, causes severe diarrhea. But we've found that you always have a few C. diff in your intestines. It's when they get into large numbers, when everybody else has been wiped out by antibiotics, that you get C. diff that you can't recover from on your own. Then there's Staphylococcus aureus. Most of us have Staph aureus hanging around in our nose, and it's not causing a problem. But you've all heard of methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. This is Staph aureus that has picked up genes to be resistant to most antibiotics, and they usually pick up toxins that cause death and destruction in your body. So these two are examples of, one, strain variation, and two, virulence. So virulence is a measure of the severity of disease they cause. So both of these are virulent opportunistic pathogens. So in other words, if they get in too high of numbers, you can get in the wrong place, or for strain variation, pick up genes for toxins, then they are more virulent and they're more likely to be a true pathogen. Now, some of these others you've also heard of in the realm of disease. Candida albicans, if you get too many of them, you develop a yeast infection. Very uncomfortable. Helicobacter pylori, originally we thought that they were only pathogens. They caused ulcers in the stomach whenever they were in the stomach. As you read through Missing Microbes, you will learn more about H. pylori and see why I put it in the category of opportunistic pathogens. It does some good, it also causes some harm. It all depends upon the situation. Same thing goes for all of these others I've marked in the light orange. Now, for some of these, we've known for years that they do some good or they are very low virulence pathogens. For example, E. coli produces vitamin K, which is necessary for humans to be able to clot their blood. So you want to have E. coli in your intestines. But if you get too many of them, then you develop colitis, you develop diarrhea, and also there's strain variation. And I will talk about E. coli in the next slide in the realm of strain variation. So let's talk about characteristics of true pathogens. So they will cause disease all of the time unless prevented. What do we mean by prevented? You get a vaccination, your immune system takes care of it, all of these fun things. With true pathogens, it's all a numbers game. If you for each type of pathogen, there is what we call an infectious dose. This is the number of organisms that if you are exposed to it, and it gets into the right place in your body, you will get disease. So more virulent organisms have a lower infectious dose. Here's a reminder, it may be strain dependent. You may have a strain of E. coli that causes no problems, but if you get a strain that has picked up a toxin gene, you will get hemorrhagic E. coli, and that's the one that you hear about in the news where people have kidney failure or bloody diarrhea. Yeah, you don't want to get that strain of E. coli. So, what are some examples from what we're studying? Campylobacter. Now, personally, since Campylobacter is so closely related to Helicobacter pylori, I can't help but wonder if we're going to find out that Campylobacter is the same sort of thing, that it's an opportunistic pathogen. So far, we haven't found that. So far, we've found that it causes diarrhea all the time, and so we're going to put it in with the true pathogens. Here, you notice I've got C. diff here, whereas I had it in the opportunistic pathogens. It all depends upon the situation, and because it is such a virulent opportunistic pathogen, it steps over into being a true pathogen an awful lot of times. Here's the E. coli that I told you about with being a strain variant. If you get the wrong strain, it's a true pathogen. If you get the right strain, it could be your friend. You've all heard of herpes simplex. Then we got the causative agent of tuberculosis. So far as I know, it never does you any good, but it can go into hiding and not cause disease, waiting for the opportune moment to cause tuberculosis, and you start coughing up blood. But it doesn't do any good while it's hanging out, so it is not an opportunistic pathogen. And then we have the causative agent of cholera. In summary, interactions of microbes with the host are complicated. Interactions with microbes with each other are complicated. We're going to get more into that part. And there are varying strains of pathogenicity. So you've got some that don't cause very severe disease, you have some that cause severe disease, and then we have strain variation within the microbes that are a part of the human microbiome. So depending upon the strain, they may be your friend or they may be a true pathogen. So hopefully this helps you understand the difference between mutualistic symbionts, opportunistic pathogens, and what I'm calling true pathogens or pathogens. And hopefully it also helps you feel like not all germs are bad.